There's something you need to know, something that might shatter the way you see yourself. The truth is, you were never as unreadable as you thought. To those who truly mattered, to the ones who watched closely, your secrets were never hidden. They noticed the subtle shift in your voice when you lied, the way your laughter grew too loud when you felt invisible, the way you filled every silence because stillness left you feeling exposed. Someone at some point read you, not with words but with attention. They saw the parts of you you've spent years trying to suppress, control, or deny, and you never even realized it. No one ever teaches us that being seen isn't about grand gestures. It's quiet, gradual, almost surgical. The best readers don't announce their insights. They simply never forget them. Nietzsche didn't show us how to read people to gain power. He revealed what happens when we fail to look beyond the mask, when we fall for someone's performance, or worse, when we start believing our own. This isn't about mind tricks or body language hacks. It's about reading people on a level where truth seeps through the pauses, the deflections, the tone beneath the words. By the end, you won't just know how to read others, you'll realize they've been reading you all along. This isn't the start of clarity, it's the end of hiding. Most people think they're hard to read. They wear confidence like armor, speak with rehearsed certainty, and present carefully curated identities, not out of deceit, but out of fear. Nietzsche saw right through that. He believed people rarely speak from truth. They speak from self-protection. Language, he said, wasn't made to reveal who we are, but to help us survive, to hide, to belong. When someone speaks, you're not hearing their soul. You're hearing their mask justify its right to exist. We trust words too much, but the truth leaks out in tension, in silence, in the gap between what's said and how it's said. Nietzsche didn't just study language, he studied contradiction. He believed real truth isn't in what's spoken, but in what's avoided. Once you start seeing the world through that lens, everything becomes transparent. The man who never stops talking, he's terrified of stillness. The perfectionist obsessed with control, she's battling her own inner chaos. Those who judge the loudest often despise in others what they can't face in themselves. People aren't mysteries, they're patterns, shaped by pain, childhood, and fear, repeated until they become personality. When you start seeing people this way, you can never go back. What once looked like arrogance reveals itself as insecurity. What once felt like rejection is now just self-protection. What once hurt you now simply makes sense. You don't need a psychology degree to read people. You just need to stop believing what they say and start noticing what they show. Nietzsche was right. People aren't hiding from you. They're hiding from themselves. Every profound spirit needs a mask, Nietzsche said. And like most of his insights, it's not just poetic, it's dangerous. Once you understand this, you stop believing in surfaces. Stop trusting every smile. Stop mistaking kindness for purity. You realize what someone shows you isn't always who they are. Masks aren't worn because people are fake, but because the truth costs too much. From childhood we learn if you cry too loud, you're too sensitive. If you question too much, you're too difficult. If you shine too bright, you're too full of yourself. So we adjust, shapeshift, and call it personality. But Nietzsche knew identity. As most present is a mask, not a lie, but a survival mechanism. The deeper someone is, the more layered their mask, because the more profound your spirit, the more dangerous your authenticity can feel to others and to yourself. But here's the catch. Masks always leak. No matter how carefully constructed, they slip in body language, in the stiffness of shoulders, the restless hands, in tone, the practiced voice, the hollow laugh, in discomfort when the subject gets too close or the silence gets too loud. Real identity lives in contradiction. The person who says they're fine while clenching their jaw, the one who preaches positivity but can't sit still, the person who claims not to care what others think while scanning the room for approval. If you want to see the truth, stop listening for it and start watching for what leaks through. When you catch someone obsessively checking how they're being perceived, that's not deception. It's the mask slipping, the cracks starting to show. If you're observant, you'll notice that the real person always lives beneath the performance, not polished or perfect, but raw, anxious, and unfiltered. The moment you stop believing in masks, you don't just start reading others, you begin to recognize how many masks you've worn yourself. That's where true clarity begins, not in decoding others, but in finally admitting you were never exempt from the act. Reading people isn't magic or some mystical sixth sense reserved for a chosen few. It's not about gifted intuition. The people who are best at reading others aren't special, they're simply attentive to what everyone else overlooks. They train themselves to spot the patterns that most dismiss. Because the truth is, people are remarkably predictable, not because they lack depth, but because they're shaped by unfinished stories they keep reenacting. You've probably heard someone say, "I just have a feeling about them." But skilled readers don't rely on gut feelings. They rely on data, on the small, consistent signals that repeat across conversations, moods, and moments. It starts with subtle shifts in tone, the hesitation before agreeing with something they don't believe, the voice that rises in forced confidence. Then come the contradictions. The person who claims to be laid back but can't stop correcting others. The man who says status doesn't matter but keeps name-dropping. The woman who preaches independence while desperately seeking approval. These aren't accidents. They're symptoms of deeper patterns. Timing matters too. The awkward pause after a personal question. The repeated phrases to fill empty space. The sudden change of topic when things get too close for comfort. These aren't flaws. They're fault lines. The places where the performance thins and the truth seeps through. The sharpest readers don't look for what's loud. They watch for what's off. They don't obsess over details. They notice emotional fingerprints, the things people don't realize they're doing. Real clarity isn't magic or intuition. It's discipline, pattern recognition, and the patience to stay quiet long enough to see what others are trying not to reveal one. Once you develop this skill, the world stops feeling random. You stop getting blindsided. Masks start to look transparent, and these insights become tools, not for judging others, but for dismantling your own illusions. Nietzsche didn't study people to judge them. He wanted to see through them, and what he found wasn't always a pretty one. But everyone wears a mask, not to deceive, but to survive. What you see is the version of someone that survived rejection. The louder the confidence, the more fragile the self. People hate in others what they refuse to face in themselves. Criticism is a mirror, reflecting what we can't accept about ourselves. Silence speaks louder than words. Truth leaks in the pauses, the sighs, the forced smiles. Avoidance is its own confession. Self-deception comes before lying to others. People rehearse denial until they believe it. "I'm fine, I've moved on, I don't care." They convince themselves first because they have to. Criticism isn't analysis, it's autobiography. Every complaint reveals something broken inside the complainer. Confidence often hides guilt. The most composed people are often performing certainty to bury what they can't forgive in themselves. Exaggeration reveals insecurity. The more extreme the claim, "I never care. I'm always happy. I don't need anyone," the louder the fear it's concealing. The hunger for control comes from inner chaos. Those who micromanage aren't strong. They're scared. It's easier to control others than confront yourself. Loud morality is often disguised superiority. The louder someone proclaims their virtue, the more they're hiding behind it. Real goodness is quiet. Performance is insecurity in disguise. People don't fear being hurt. They fear being seen. Vulnerability isn't dangerous because of pain, but because it threatens the identity we've built. Exposure feels like ego death. What someone defends most, they doubt most deeply. If someone over-explains their beliefs, they're not convincing you, they're trying to convince themselves. The need to be remembered hides the fear of being forgotten. The loudest attention seekers aren't vain. They're terrified they don't matter. Envy wears the mask of hate. People attack not what they despise, but what they secretly desire and believe they can't be. No one speaks from pure logic. They speak from pain. Every belief is built on scars. Every opinion has a wound beneath it. Childhood never disappears. It replays. The adult who dominates conversations was once ignored. The woman who hides emotion was punished for expressing it. Behavior is biography. People hide uncertainty to avoid collapse. The truth is, the more you learn to see through the masks, yours and others sip, the more you realize that reading people isn't about judgment or control. It sits about understanding the stories, the wounds, and the patterns that shape us all. The more inflexible someone's worldview, the more fragile their sense of self. True strength lies in adaptability, while dogma is simply fear shouting through a megaphone. Desperation often masquerades as independence. When someone insists they don't need anyone, it can mean they've simply grown tired of being let down. Watch for those who isolate themselves, not out of strength, but because disappointment has worn them down. Patterns, after all, are confessions. You don't need someone to spell out who they are, their habits, the way they retreat, how they handle silence, who they chase or avoid. None of it is random. Each pattern is a scar replaying itself. Nietzsche didn't share these truths so we could manipulate others. He offered them, so we'd stop confusing noise with honesty, performance with identity, and trauma with personality. Once you learn to recognize these patterns, you realize people aren't mysterious, they're exposed if you know how to look. Every joke, compliment, insult, and silence has an origin. The mistake most make is assuming behavior is random or rational, but Nietzsche understood people don't speak from logic, but from fear. They don't argue because they're confident, but because they're scared belief is all they have. They don't brag out of pride, but from a terror of being overlooked. They don't stay quiet because they're calm, but because somewhere in childhood, silence became their safest refuge. The real question isn't what someone says, but why they say it. The person who interrupts constantly was once unheard. The man who mocks emotion was taught vulnerability equals weakness. The friend who never asks about your life learned that attention is a scarce resource, one they were never given. And here's the twist. They're not doing any of this consciously. They're surviving on autopilot. Behind sharp intellect is often the fear of seeming foolish. Behind perfectionism, an unnamed guilt. Behind power, usually shame, shame for what they failed to do, for what they became, for the parts of themselves they buried, just to get by. You'll never hear these confessions spoken aloud. You'll see them in the way someone corrects others too quickly, clings to structure, or shuts down when intimacy enters the room. If you're not just watching the performance, but decoding its origins, you'll realize that behavior isn't a message, it's a shield built around a wound. When you stop reacting to the surface and start asking, what pain is this protecting? You don't just become perceptive, you become free. The world stops feeling so personal. The anger, the coldness, the withdrawal. It was never about you, it was always about them. We live in an age of hyper-performance, on social media, at work, even with those we love, we're always on stage. Every Instagram caption, every "I'm doing great" text, every carefully chosen outfit or delayed reply is a performance. Nietzsche saw this long before filters and followers. He wrote, "People don't live as they are. They live as the version of themselves they believe will be accepted." That's the real problem. We think people are hiding from us, but more often they're hiding from themselves. You see it every day. The man who never stops talking about strength because he's terrified of being seen as weak. The woman who posts endless quotes about healing because she hasn't let herself feel in years. The friend who jokes nonstop because silence reminds him of wounds that haven't healed. People aren't fake, they're scared that if they drop the act, they'll be abandoned, rejected, forgotten. So they curate their kindness to be admired, weaponize beliefs to feel powerful, and flaunt independence to mask loneliness. The most dangerous part? They don't even know they're doing it. Ask someone how they're doing and they smile. I'm good, but their jaw clenches, their shoulders stay tense, their laughter is just a bit too loud, their eyes flicker away from yours. They're not lying to deceive you, they're lying to protect the version of themselves they've learned is safe. The strong one, the perfect one, the healer, the unbothered, the spiritual, the always in control. In a world that rewards image over honesty, telling the truth, even to yourself, can feel dangerous. But truth leaks out anyway. It slips through the cracks of control in the way someone deflects when a topic hits too close, over-apologizes for something small, or laughs too loudly, as if volume could hide the fracture underneath. These aren't quirks, they're confessions in disguise. The ego's way of saying, I don't know how to be seen without being destroyed. As life's pressures build, the performance inevitably breaks down. That's when you witness the real moments. The sigh they didn't mean to let out. The pause that lingers a second too long. the sudden quiet after a burst of certainty, the eyes that well up before the sentence is done, the breath they take as if holding something back. That's not weakness. It's the soul surfacing, if only for a second. The truest version of a person is never who they perform to be, but who they become when they forget to perform. If you're the kind of person who notices these shifts, who feels the energy in a room change before anyone speaks, who catches the moment a mask starts to crack, you're not just observant, you're witnessing something sacred, the version of someone they haven't even dared to meet, the self buried beneath identity, survival, and the need to be accepted. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to understand that reading people isn't about judgment, it's about compassion, about seeing the humanity beneath the act. Compassion is what emerges when someone finally breaks character and lets you glimpse who they truly are. There's a quiet, almost imperceptible moment in conversation, maybe while someone complains, postures, or boasts, when for the first time you simply observe. You don't react, you don't feel attacked, you don't feel the urge to defend yourself. Instead, you see the patterns, the way they over-explain, the hollowness behind their confidence, the silence that's just a bit too heavy. Suddenly it clicks. None of this was ever about you. The things that used to sting, the arrogance, the coldness, the neediness, don't wound you anymore because now you recognize them for what they are. Wounds armored in bravado, silence, or virtue. It's not weakness. It's survival, cloaked in whatever form helps them get through the day. When you finally see this, something irreversible happens. Empathy becomes inevitable, not the performative kind, but the kind born from grief, from knowing firsthand how hard it is to be human. Once you see what people are truly running from, the guilt behind the bragging, the fear behind the control, the sadness behind the silence, you stop engaging with the mask and begin to recognize the pain that built it. This was Nietzsche's gift, not a tool for manipulation, but a way to stop being fooled by the surface. The real danger isn't that people lie to you. It's that they believe their own lies and then expect you to live inside their fiction, to respond to their character instead of the truth behind the role. If you can't see through it, you get swept up in the theater, chasing validation from the insecure, fearing rejection from those terrified of connection, feeling inferior to someone who's secretly crumbling inside. But when you finally see people clearly, everything changes. Rejection no longer stings, because you understand it's just a reflex, a wound, not a verdict. You don't get baited by conflict, because drama isn't danger, it's dysregulation. You're no longer seduced by loud confidence, because you know that volume often masks fear. Instead of reacting to emotion, you read the situation, and in that space, clarity dissolves confusion. You stop asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and start wondering, "What pain are they protecting?" In that clarity, anger dies. You're no longer fighting reality, no longer taking on someone else's trauma as your own, no longer making their dysfunction your responsibility. This doesn't make you weaker. It makes you unshakable, not because you're cold, but because you're finally awake to the architecture of human behavior, to the patterns behind the personalities, to the fact that most people aren't dangerous, they're just scared. Once you see this, you stop needing to fight and start choosing to understand. Manipulation loses its power, resentment fades, and you reclaim your own sense of self. You realize you were never becoming a reader of people. You were remembering something ancient, something buried. The truth was always visible. You just weren't taught how to see it. People leak their stories in every gesture, every contradiction, every silence they try to fill. Now you see it. What looked like ego was fear. What felt like rejection was self-protection. What you once took personally was never about you. You're not just reading people now. You're remembering that the patterns were always there, waiting for someone to point them out. And here's the paradox. The clearer you see others, the less you feel the need to defend yourself. What used to confuse you can't touch you anymore. You don't need to react when you understand. You're not standing above people, you're standing with them, finally seeing what they've been too scared to face. This was never about judgment. It's about awakening to the pain behind the perfection, to the wounds behind the armor, to the humanity behind the behavior. If you've ever felt misunderstood, if people misread your silence, your strength, your softness, Now you understand why. They weren't trying to misunderstand you. They were wearing masks too, and people in masks can't recognize the faces of others. Nietzsche understood this best. Power isn't about being unreadable. It's about being seen, fully, deeply, and still being chosen. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength. So remember, you were never truly hidden. They already knew who you were. Now finally, so do you.
Hey friends, thanks for watching. This video shares general wellness tips for seniors, not medical advice. Always consult your doctor before trying anything new. Stay healthy and I will see you in the next one. Subscribe if you have enjoyed. Thank you.